Hello and welcome. I've got a bit of sketchbook show and tell today because I've been inspired by a few YouTubers I follow who are doing a Finish Your Sketchbook challenge for themselves. And I must admit, this is a problem I've got. I have so many sketchbooks that are incomplete, and this is a great example. It's at least 5, maybe 6 years old. It's one of those Strathmore mixed media journals, so it's really good quality paper in there. It was soft cover and I started with all sorts of enthusiasm. I even created this little jacket for it, and I was using it for a course I was taking, which I absolutely loved, which was all about watercolour cursive lettering, which is a challenge for me because when I was at school we did printing. I never learnt cursive, and then the idea was that you would take a letter of the alphabet for each page and fill it with some illustrations relating to that letter. What a great idea, don't you think? And in the class we did chairs, and they were so much fun. They were wonderful. But I did do a couple of other pages with some illustrations, but I hated them. And I have to admit, yesterday I rubbed out most of them. You see, this is what happens when you leave a project for a long time and you spend forever filling up the book. Your skill level definitely changes, and you've got this weird mix of terrible drawings along with whatever you're doing now, which is hopefully a bit better. For example, J was going to be for jars, and I think it will be. But you see, 5 years ago, I wasn't exactly very good at perspective. And so the curve on that jar lid should be the same as the curve on the bottom. So that's really going to bother me, and I am itching to fix that. But I left it as an example to show you what I mean, the perils of letting your sketchbook take so long to be filled. So I want to take up the challenge for myself of filling up this little book, so we'll get to that in a minute. But one of the other things I wanted to show you that I'd forgotten about until I'd taken out this book was this kind of watercolour, because this is the watercolour that I'm actually using. It's watercolour that comes in card, so it's dry and very handy and portable. I don't know if you've seen that before. You may well have seen there was a lot of marketing effort for these little sets. Colour sheets, so it's vivid transparent watercolour, and this was a beautiful little set that was gifted to me by a very dear friend who I haven't seen in years, and she just sent them to me out of the blue, and it's so neat and lovely. I've been a little bit afraid to use it, but I definitely have that on my to-do list. But it is the same sort of thing as the original set I had, which was a different brand, Peerless, and this is how they come. Now these were, I think it's so fascinating because it's a bit of a history lesson. Like in the old days when photographs were monochrome, if you wanted them coloured, some artists had to sit and actually colour them in, and apparently this is what they actually used. And it's quite interesting because sometimes, like that, believe it or not, is crimson. So the colour on the card really doesn't tell you what the colour is when you actually paint it. The back of the card is a better indication. And of course, I took this up as a craft project, didn't I? And created, by cutting out those little pieces of card, my own little portable palettes, because I love the idea of being able to have flat, dry watercolour that would just slip into my sketchbook and I could take it anywhere I went. So I cut out the little pieces, and I've put a piece of transparency to be as a little palette, which is great for mixing, and it also obviously protects these sheets. But I did want to show you, obviously, when I got these I went mad and started creating them for all sorts of journals. So here's a big journal that I was using for another course. Again, many years ago, and I created a giant version of that. And this is a bit of a tale of woe because, as you can see over here, I spilt my water jar all over that, so I don't know how much colour still remains on those little cards and how much was just washed in when I spilt my water bottle all over my palette. How sad, right? And here's yet another one. Do you remember these? Has anybody got one of these still? They seemed like such a great idea. I was going to be super organised. I was going to carry my sketchbook everywhere and have my planner in the middle. So of course, who doesn't love another craft project opportunity? I created a lovely little palette, the same thing again. It's these same cards cut up in there. As you can see, I don't use them particularly much, do I? I love the craft side and I love the idea of the sketching, but filling the sketchbook is the next challenge. So that's what I'm focusing on at the moment. So let me put these aside and we'll get back to my original sketchbook I was showing you and see what we can do about filling one of those pages. So as you can see, I've decided to go for the page that is for the letter P, and I decided P would be for potted plants because those are one of my very favourite things to draw. And I'm starting out with a lemon tree in a pot. I do love getting to paint these bright lemons. They're an awful lot of fun, and I'm just doing a pencil sketch. When I originally started this sketchbook and following along with Danielle Donaldson's class, the idea was to use graphite pencil sketching and a combination of, if I remember correctly, it was an awfully long time ago, graphite pencil and watercolour and a few coloured pencils, I think. But I've never really made friends with graphite pencils, and so I'm opting to use my favourite erasable coloured pencil as usual. And I happen to have picked a blue one there, and I'm doing a very loose sketch in pencil. I think I'm going to go back to pen in a minute and add some pen, but I want to dab in some colour first. And it did occur to me that it's been almost as many years since I've used these particular watercolours, so I don't even remember what they were like and what the colours were like. So I got out yet another unfinished sketchbook and had a little bit of a play with those colours so that I had a little bit of an idea of what I was going to be dealing with. And I decided, since I was going to paint lovely bright yellow lemons, to go for a fetching dark blue pot. And I'm really painting outside of the lines, and my lines are very loose. If you've been around here before, welcome back and thank you for coming back. I always paint in a kind of a loose style, and it seems I draw in a loose style too. I actually think this is one of the reasons that I don't go back to my sketchbooks as often as I want to, because I get a little bit confused about whether I'm an illustrator or a painter, and whether I should be working to a theme, and whether I'm too whimsical or want to try and be more realistic, and all of that is just way too much, far too unnecessary thinking. So I'm trying to let go of all of that and just paint and draw the way I paint and draw, which is very loose and sketchy. So at the moment I'm waiting for that lemon tree to dry, but I think I will go back and firm it up with a few pen details in a minute. But I can't do that until the paint is dry, because if I go and put my lovely artist pen on a wet page, it's going to damage the pen. Now I've decided to go to the other page in the meantime and draw a different type of potted plant, because I do rather love those monster leaves there. And I'm not a particular fan of too much heavy black pen either, and what I've got there is actually a dark brown pen, and I'm gonna go over my lines. In this particular pot plant, I'd used a few more sketching lines to get the basic outside shapes of those leaves before I went in and put in the lovely negative spaces between them. And now that I've done those lines, I think my lemon tree is dry enough that I can go back and add a few squiggly lines here and there to put in some more of the details of those trees. I'm not particularly worried about, well, I suppose what I mean is I'm not aiming to do kind of a colouring book illustration, so I'm not looking for perfect line drawings and careful colouring in the middle. I'm kind of hoping, and I know that given the way I paint it will turn out this way, that there will be colour that extends beyond the lines and colour that doesn't quite fill to the edges of the lines, and I rather like that loose kind of playful, whimsical feel. That's what makes me happy. Now I'm just about finished that delicious monster plant there, adding in a few more darks to give the idea of the leaves sitting forward and behind one another. But it's not quite dry, so I've had to put a bit of kitchen towel underneath my hand to kind of cover the work I've been doing so that I can carry on and impatiently complete the page, as you know I so want to do. And I've decided to do something a little bit more colourful up there. So this time I'm going to draw a potted plant that has a few flowers on it. So there's those lovely tall wispy strands of flowers, and again I'm not trying to draw every single petal. I'm really just suggesting some of the shapes of those tiny little flowers, which I'm going to make purple in a minute. And since they're going to be purple, a yellow pot is going to be a lovely, bright, exciting contrast, and again make the lemon tree on the other side connect to this page as well. And I've only got 2 greens, so I'm having to mix in a few of the yellows into those greens as well to get some variety and depth into the plants in that foreground. I didn't really have terribly much of a plan about what I was going to draw on this page, other than that it was going to be potted plants. And 3 is quite a nice number to stop at, but the page still looked a little bit empty, so I'm going to carry on. And the colour that I wrote the P in at the bottom of this page is a red colour, but as I said, it's been such a long time since I used these paints that I wasn't even sure which red that was, but I think I've managed to match them up there, so I've chosen to make that pot red. And I love the curve I got on the left hand side of the pot, but I didn't quite manage to match that as well as I'd like on the right, but you know, never mind, it's just a sketchbook. And I'm also looking to put in a bit of variety here, so a palm tree seemed a good choice because it's got such a different shape of leaf. And palm trees I find rather fun to paint because actually the paintbrush itself does most of the work. Since I went and added a 4th plant, I'm going to have to put 1 more up on that left-hand page, and I think once I've done that, 5 is another nice odd number, and that'll be a good place to stop. And I'm thinking still about variety, so I decided to change the shape of the pot that I'm putting these plants in. So this one is kind of a long flat pot, and I'm using the same colour red as I used for the palm tree on the right hand side to put in the pot to connect these 2 pages. And this, I think, is one of those miniature gardens, so I'm putting a couple of different plants in there and some nice dark soil underneath it. And now that I've done that, my palm tree is dry enough for me to go back and add pen details. And of course, once you start adding details in one place, you can't resist putting them in another. I also think if you're going for a sketchy feel, a few extra lines looks a little bit better than just 1 line. If you've got just 1 line, then I think it should be a clean, neat, perfect line. And since we know clean, neat and perfect is not me, we're going to go for lots of little sketchy lines. Let's call that done for the letter P. 25 letters to go.